Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation unsaid. Joining us, our good friends, Rabbi Barry J. Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City. Guys, great to see you. We haven't been together for a couple of weeks now. We pre-recorded Vayigash. We are going to record Parasha Vayehi. This is the last Parsha in Bereishit. Before we start, thank you to our our myriads and thousands of viewers and listeners. I think we're up to 300 to 400 people. I really think so. When we started a couple of years ago. It's already almost. We had three. Now, of course, most of those views are me and my mom, but but shout out because she's watching. So, but we really thank you, and it really means a lot to us when you write into us and comment, ask questions. We never answer your questions, but that's okay.
We consider it. Think about it.
Parashat Vayehi, the last parsha. I think maybe we'll spend some time at the end thinking about reflections on the book of Bereishit. But let's start by saying, where are we? We are now at the end of Jacob's life. It's 17 years since he came down, 17 years since the reunion of Jacob and Joseph and the reconstitution of the family as a family. And Jacob he knows that his time is coming. He makes Joseph promise, but not only promise, swear that he will take him back and bury him in the land of Israel. And he will adopt Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. There's a lot going on here in the sense of what Jacob wants, what Jacob sees in Joseph, and Joseph's position of power. And yet I want to say that there's a lot of powerlessness in Joseph also. And I'll point out, and maybe we'll fast forward to the time when he dies. Jacob gives a long and beautiful testament poem to the sons when he kind of settles some scores too in that testament to them. But then he dies, and of course, as a moment of passing, I'll pull up the verse here where it says that he gathers himself into the bed. Vayichal Yaakov letzavot et banav. Jacob finished instructions to his sons. He drew his feet into the bed. Vayesof raglav el hamita. Breathing his last, he was gathered to his people. Vayigva vayasef el amav. Can we just stop there and just kind of remark on the gorgeousness of the prose here? Sof raglav vayasef el amav. There's Yosef in the background. There's a little bit of play on this world, and of course you all know the beautiful line. He doesn't say that he died. Didn't say that he died. Vayigva, he just expired, but he didn't die.
He
passed his best sell days.
He passed the sell by date, but he didn't. Yeah, this is a famous, as you were alluding to, famous line in the Talmud, which is both deep and funny, because as the Talmud says, Yaakov Avinu lo met, he never died, and then the editorial voice in the Talmud says, well, then why did they embalm him and put him in a coffin? and then continues and says, no. Mazaro kayam, apu kayam. As long as his children exist, he still exists.
Which is such a fascinating statement, such a gorgeous sentiment about the eternity of the people of Israel. I mean, and so on the one hand, I want to say, we get to a kind of depressed ending of this book, and yet we want to pull out the light. We want to pull some hope here and some. I don't know if I want to say joy, but at least I want to say meaning.
No, listen, I think this is, you're right on both counts. You're right on the dark tone to this book that ends in exile, which, any Jewish or Israelite reader of Genesis knows that we're just on the edge of slavery. By the time there was a Torah, we all knew what the story was, and so there is a dark and foreboding quality to the end of this book. And the use of the word mitah, the bed, is very literarily sensitive, and it's got a lot of space in there because the bed represents um, uh, sexual reproduction. The bed, the place where reproduction happens, is a symbol of the life-giving force that is Yaakov Avinu. Jacob is with the 12 children, and then the expansion of the Joseph, expansion of Joseph into Ephraim and Manasseh, and Joseph himself will later see, 3 generations of Manasseh's children and Ephraim's children. The claim that's being made here is, at one point in the early part of the Parsha, Vayishtachu Yisrael el Rosh HaMitah, Jacob bows down at the head of the bed. And it's not just like an old man who's kind of leaning over with the place where he sleeps. No. He is giving thanks, and he is affirming. They had some tough times, and Judah had his bad moments, and Reuben had his bad moments, and they were not nice to their brother Yosef. But they are all together. They are all alive. They are all surviving and thriving. And so this is a huge affirmation of the tribes of Israel alive and.
So it's interesting you said that. I want to just quote back what the blessing that he gives to Ephraim and Manasseh includes the words Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, the angel, the messenger that has redeemed me from all of the terrible things. And you just said here he is at the bowing at his bedside with thanks. So let me ask you this question: Do you think Jacob is whole at the end of his life? Do you think he is? Do you think he has made peace with himself, with his sons? Can you if you're presiding at his funeral, I want to say, look, if you're presiding at his funeral, okay, and what's the eulogy you're going to give over him?
Allah Shalom.
Allah Shalom. I'm sorry.
Well,
so I think what the indication that he's whole comes in that line, Hamalach hagoel oti, because it's a recognition that at key elements of his life, Jacob was involved with an angel. When he left home at the beginning of Vayetze, he meets the angel going up and down the ladder to heaven. When he comes back, he wrestles that celestial being, sometimes referred to as an angel.
Ooh,
and Jacob lives his life touched by an angel. So even though he told Pharaoh that his life was difficult and hard and short, he recognizes at the end that he was actually quite blessed in a way that echoes the blessing of Abraham, where it says, Adonai berach et Abraham bakol, after Sarah died, which is not some misogynist comment, but an indication that one can be whole even when pain.
I was thinking about this, in preparing a comment on this, and trying to go over all the things that he went through. So he did go through some very difficult times. I mean, he paid dearly for his stealth and his duplicity with his brother. He paid dearly from Lavan. He comes back to the land. He's certainly been humbled, but he still behaves in a certain way when he's in the land, that is to say, cautious. His daughter is raped. His precious wife Rachel dies. His son Joseph, his favorite son, is presumed to be dead. He lives out decades of his life in mourning, refusing to be comforted, and he's got what to cry over in his life. And he then says, "Hamalach hagoel oti mikora," that I'm redeemed. So I love what you said, Barry. That there are angels. The angels join him at various junction points in his life, and that's very powerful idea because it's in the text. But he's also had a hard life, and maybe he's saying, "Look, I've come to terms with the fact that I've lived a very, very painful life," and so the question is, am I at peace now?
So, earlier, after in Vayishlach, when he wrestles with the angel and he's said to be limping, or Tsolea al Yerecho, he's kind of limping after that experience. And the next line is Vayavo Yaakov Shalem Ir Shechem. He comes whole, or he comes in peace to his next place where he's going to live, which, by the way, that's where the bad stuff happens again. And I on a religious level or a spiritual level, I think that really does speak to me, because he's limping and he's whole. He's broken and he's whole, and I think that's the way life is. The true self, everyone's true self is broken and whole, and I think that's a good thing. Now, is Jacob what is his own psychological self-consciousness, self-reflection? That's a harder one for me. I like the scene where he meets Pharaoh. This was last week's Parsha. He meets Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, "How old are you?" He says, "Ra'im u'matim." Like, my days have been, the food is so terrible in such small portions. I haven't lived very long, and it's really been bad. And that's that kind of bitterness you want to get past. I hope he is not now, and I think he is not now in that mode. When he meets Pharaoh, he's like, "This stinks." But he also at the beginning of this parsha says, I never thought I was going to see you again, and here I am seeing your children. It's to me, it is exactly what you're kind of alluding to or wondering about. Can you be broken and whole? Yeah, he suffered. I had a pastoral meeting today with somebody who many years before had lost. This is about earlier part of their lives, but many years before they lost a child, and they got great blessings in their life, and they also have a pain that's never going to go away. So I think that's just
so. What I would say is that you cannot avoid bad in your life, but what you hope is you live long enough to be able to contextualize it, so it is not the dominant thing in your life. That the pain that we experience, some of it does live on with us every day, but it doesn't necessarily dominate our lives the way it did in the immediacy of the moment. And I think Jacob, 17 years later, sees that there were bad, dark days, as you alluded to, Elliot, but there was also much good.
So it's interesting, there's a rabbinic line, Hasharui belo simcha, sharui belo bracha. A person who doesn't experience joy cannot give a blessing. And despite the fact that that's a rabbinic line, I do want to take a license and superimpose this over. Maybe he has reached a point of gratitude, a point of joy, where he could say, and he says it in a characteristic way, Amalach hagoel oti mikora, you've taken my life from all of this difficult things. Or maybe he's saying, hagoel oti in the present, because I am going to be redeemed. I have been redeemed. And you will repatriate my bones to the land of Israel. They will be redeemed, and our descendants will be redeemed.
How about exactly this? It's not Hamalach, it's not this divine or superpower who has led me through life without Ra. It's that Ra has beset my life all the time.
Yes.
The painful stuff is, I have not failed to experience those things, but I have felt also a presence who is goeloti mikol ra, who can redeem me, and that I think is a very serious and good aspiration for people to have. Not that you won't have pain.
Spin that out for a second, which is that if the Ra is present in his life at all times, the Goel is a constant. In other words, if you were going to spin this into a little drash and say, we live all the time with very difficult, very challenging, and often catastrophic things, and we are in a constant state of needing this geula, this redemption from that very difficulty. Is that what Not bad. Well, what about the idea that this is a projection to the future, that hagoel oti is this is what's going to happen because, and here I'll go to this idea, which is Jacob really sees that Joseph is in a fix, and I love I relate to this as a parent. Okay, you want the best for your children. Okay, and you want to make sure that they make the right choices, and and I remember you don't want things not working out for your children, and here he sees his son, his favorite son Yosef, who is the most powerful person in Egypt next to Pharaoh, and he realizes that this is smoke and mirrors, that this is a big charade. He's not free at all. And he never ceases to remind Joseph that, because he makes Joseph make an oath, swear to him that he will take him up to Egypt. He doesn't really play the game well last week's Parsha when he meets Pharaoh. And I think there's hints after hints that he sees Egypt for what it is, which is a despotic, tyrannical, benevolent tyranny.
I want to offer a slightly different take. I think that it's not a charade, but it's not the end. That it's easy to look at Joseph as being totally immersed in Egyptian culture and life up until the very end, when he makes his brothers swear that his bones will be taken out of Egypt to be buried in the ancestral land of Canaan. That Joseph is someone who has always been ambitious and worked very hard to realize his ambitions, and seemed for a good part of his life to be unaware of the great cost that they had, both to him and everyone around him. We often gloss over the fact that in the Torah's telling, the man responsible for destroying Egyptian peasant life is Joseph. He had everyone sold as a slave to the Pharaoh. Right? What Pharaoh couldn't do himself, he allowed Joseph the Hebrew to do.
Unfortunately, this is 100% correct and very, very important. Joseph builds Egypt as a slave state. Joseph builds Egypt as a totalitarian state that Pharaoh's the god and owns all the land and all the people and all the animals. And the Bechor Shor, a great like Rashi era French commentator, when in Parsha Shmot it says that Pharaoh made the Israelites work as slaves in the Arei Miskenot, the store cities. Bechor Shor says the Egyptians, once they forgot Yosef, they forced the Israelites to work because the Egyptians said, you guys were complicit with Pharaoh in oppressing us. You guys built these store cities. You took all of you Israelites as Pharaoh's hench people. You contributed to this despotic state. And you didn't have to pay. We all had to pay these taxes. We all had to give up our food. You didn't have to give up your food. Now you're going to work it off. And I think that's an incredibly interesting comment for a medieval French Jew who lives in a time when presumably, there are like certain of those things that we recognize as anti-Semitic tropes. Secret power behind the throne and stuff like that. They control the economy, they control the money, and they have this secret cabal of power. Bechor Shor sort of reads those instincts into this fact that you pointed out, Barry.
Well, so just have one other thing is that if we don't have the book of Exodus and the rest of the Torah, Genesis is an incredibly depressing book, because we end in Egypt with our great leader Yosef completely Egyptianized. And I wanted to draw your attention, you wanted to talk a little bit about the context of Bereishit. The last word of Bereishit is Mitzrayim, and the last word of Devarim is Yisrael. So we go from Egypt to Israel. That is our task. That's our life's journey, to go from Egypt to Israel. And what we come across is this idea, I think, that's embedded in the text, is that there always is a tomorrow, right? That's always our hope. You got to live a long life by waking up every day. If you miss one, you've had it.
I find it's a very compelling reading, to see the arc of the book of Bereishit, from the expanse of creation to a box, right? He's in a box in Egypt,
Right,
and
the
you're
Arab.
saying he's completely Egyptianized. So let's take a moment to think about Joseph, and to think about the end of his life, and to eulogize him a little bit. We were saying there are things that he did. He saved his family, but do you think he's regretful? A, B, what do you make of the fact that he makes the brothers promise to take his bones out of Egypt? I would, put out there the idea that this is just narcissism. He wants to put himself in the center of the story of the Exodus. The Exodus that will come is not going to be complete without Joseph. And
So,
and it's remarkable that he wants to be on the stage. He wants to be in the procession in his bones.
but Elliot, you have to reckon with what happens to these bones. They're
Okay.
mentioned exactly twice more. When Moses gathers them to take them out before they leave Egypt, and when Joshua buries them at
Yes.
the end of the book of Joshua.
Okay.
So now your reading suggests that this is the Torah's, I guess now we're talking about the Tanakh since we're into Yoshua already. It's an ironic comment that Joseph wanted to be at the center, but we're careful readers and we'll make sure that he doesn't get too much attention the rest of the way. But what I wanted to suggest is that perhaps more than the other characters in the Tanakh, Joseph is almost everything he does can be read in one of two ways. It can be read for the good and it can be read for the bad. So last week, he has the brothers arranged to be in Goshen, and we think how wonderful they could worship the way that they want, they could live the way they want. But maybe it's Joseph's way of saying, I don't want you around here. You're in my domain now, and I live in a different world.
Not only that,
we'll
but I want you to be. I want to provide for you so that you'll be subordinate to me.
And we'll keep you off to the side. On the other, and there aren't enough clues, I think, because I think as you go through, you see that everything is susceptible of this reading, and we're not really left with enough. So I think what ultimately determines how we look at Joseph is what we bring to the story ourselves, the experiences of our own lives and how we see people.
So I'm gonna go a little bit differently. I mean, first of all, the narcissism thing is really an interesting read, heavily brought to the character of Joseph, who from his childhood,
It's a narcissist.
it was all about me. No, that part's true. But I also think that because for the other reasons that you have observed in the course of our conversation, this book, which places the Israelite people in the exile, in the foreign place in Golah, and because this is such a present theme throughout all Jewish life in the many centuries, Joseph in this respect represents perhaps not the totally exceptional, narcissistic for good reason hero, but every Jew who can always kind of be Egyptian and kind of forget where their homeland is and what their home nation is. And in fact, the claim, like Joseph, who for these years has been known far and wide as Tzafnat Paneach, who his brothers didn't even recognize, who's got an Egyptian wife, an Egyptian, power. The seduction is, truly, at the end of the day, I'm an Egyptian. And the Torah tells us that the end feature of his story is that he says, listen, I know what this looks like, but I'm not an Egyptian. I'm one of you, and I want to go where we're from. And the passionate concern, like throughout the many centuries of Jewish history, people being buried in Eretz Yisrael, they really like that. That's a theme too. To me, it's at least partly Joseph's affirmation that despite what this looks like, I'm not an Egyptian. I don't want to be an Egyptian. I want to be an Israelite, and that means a connection to the homeland.
Okay, so you took the edge off the narcissism here. I can buy that, and maybe I'll give a little more compassion, which is that Joseph is eliciting the the need for forgiveness, the need for closing all, the bows, basically tying all the bows here, which is I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews. Gunov gunavti me'eretz ha'ivrim. He said, I was stolen. I was made a slave, and a slave is a person who is a living dead. And I want you to repatriate my bones, which are the symbol of the dead. I want to be linked to the living. I want to be part of the land of the living. Now, it's we say this in Tied nishmato tzirura b'tzora chaim. I mean, may their soul be bound up in the bond of life. It's such a, when we think about the expression, it's truly, meaningful in the sense that, what do the dead want? The dead want to be connected to the living. And what do the living want? The living want to be connected, to their ancestors in some way. And he's saying, look, I can't go, I will not get there with you. I've seen the promise. No, that's Moses and Martin Luther King, right? I've seen the promise. I may not get there with you, right? At least bring my bones there. At least inter my bones there. I think about, I've taught about, after Israel was proclaimed, they brought Herzl's bones and they reinterred Herzl on Mount Herzl. They reinterred Jabotinsky. They brought Chana Senesh back. And all this was important in the early days of Israel in order to, A, tell the Zionist story, and B, to identify these founders, these founding heroic figures, and more, with the land itself. And we have this idea, many people, pay lots of money today to inter their bones in Israel. And we've talked about it in the past, that your body is the actual part of the soil. But here I want to be part of the living. I want to be part of I literally am literarily the continuing link to the story.
Well,
I wonder, Elliot, if given we've talked about this in different parshiot, different contexts, I think one of the ways in which what you're saying now really works is that Egypt, is the cult of the dead. Egypt is these tremendous, what do you call it? Not necropolis with all the, you could imagine if we carry this out, that Safnat Paneach, who has saved Egypt through the famine, is passing away, and they have a meeting of Pharaoh's council and says, okay, somebody needs to start to plan the pyramid for Safnat Paneach. And Joseph says, absolutely not. I am not, I'm not going into the land. I'm not going to be part of this cult of the dead. I'm not going to be part of the Valley of the Kings. I'm going to be back in the land, Be'artzot HaChaim. Okay, yes, still dead, but connected with life and the God who loves life and the people who chooses life is a powerful, potentially powerful affirmation.
So I want to add something here. So when Jacob dies, it says, Vayesei Elamav, he's gathered unto his people, even though he's in Egypt, and he is surrounded by his children and presumably his grandchildren. When Joseph dies, he just dies. And the only way he could be Ne'asaf Elamav is to have his bones brought back to the land.
Nice.
That it's a way of connecting himself to the people on one hand, but on the other hand, it also gives the descendants their own physical connection to a land that in a generation or two, none of them would ever have seen. And that's the eternal hope, that no matter how dark things look, and as you said, we have Joseph in this box at the end, filled with embalming fluid, yet there's still hope that there is a world out there that we can navigate. And a destiny.
I want to end with another theme on Joseph, because there seems, Joseph is really conflicted in his place. You get the sense that he wants to be among the founders of the people in that founding triumvirate. He wants to be like the fourth, and he can't. And he's not. He's differentiated from the rest of the brothers. So he's not a patriarch, and he's not really the part of the children of Israel. It's his sons that become the tribal leaders, the tribal names, Ephraim and Manasseh, and not Joseph. And so I'm
Yeah, but I don't. I would not take that. I would take that actually in a different way. I would say that means that Joseph is those things because the just real quick, the straight up kind of economic, so to speak, meaning of Ephraim and Menashe is that this is Jacob doing what has been implicit through the story is making Joseph the true Bechor, the true firstborn. The firstborn, the way biblical inheritance works is the estate is divided up to as many, one portion more than the number of children or male heirs at any rate that there are. 6 children, the state gets seven pieces, and the firstborn gets 2, and everyone else gets 1. And so what has happened here is that Joseph is elevated as the true firstborn. Ephraim and Menashe are now taken to be full tribes. They're brought up a generation. That means Joseph has gotten a double portion, exactly the thing that Jacob wrangled out of Esau. Joseph wrangles off of his brothers. By the way, the book of Deuteronomy says very clearly, you can't do that. If you have a loved wife and a hated wife, and the hated wife produces the physical firstborn, that's the Bechor. You can't livaker, that you can't make the Bechor out of the younger children. But Joseph does get that in Ephraim and Menashe. And I would also point out that in the blessing, the poetic blessing, everybody else gets basically a one-liner, and Joseph gets like a long, not long, but Joseph gets like 2 and 3 and 4 times the attention that everybody else gets. So he's distinct from them. Yes, it's true. He's not Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, but he really there's no question about who the most important one of this generation is.
But we also know that there is one older son that does triumph, and that's Judah through the Davidic monarchy. And Judah, the kingdom of Judah will outlast the kingdom of Ephraim, better known as Israel, by close to 150 years. And that seems to be the only place where the older son actually is triumphant over the younger son. All the other stories in the Bible, it's the younger son. And one of the most interesting to me is David is the 7th son, and Solomon, I think, is the 8th son. So they're pretty far down on the pecking order, and they're the 2 greatest kings in Israel.
Wow! So here we are. We've come all this way. We've 12 parshiot in Bereishit. We're completing the book of Bereishit now. I always feel very sad ending this parsha. It's a part of our lives. These are the people that shape our view of the world and shape who we are as a people, as their descendants. We miss them. They are our ancestors. We've gotten to be in their lives for a bit, and part of the completion of Vayehi, this parsha, is to say goodbye to them, and almost like see you next year also. But they never.
But it's also to say chazak v'nitchazek, that we should be strengthened by it as well.
And then we take them we'll take them with us. We'll plenty of mention of them in the next part. What's that?
Yeah, we'll carry the bones. This is the thing. We'll carry the bones. And as the Midrash, I'm sure we've discussed this Midrash in the past, that the Midrash imagines the Israelites going through the desert carrying 2 wooden boxes, one of which includes the stone tablets that Moses brought, and one includes Joseph's bones. And they say, well, and people will come and say to them, what's with the 2 boxes? And they will say, the person in this box kept up the Torah in this box. And that's just a great Midrash.
That's great.
But it goes back to what we said before, because both of them are broken, the bones and the tablets, and yet they sustain the life of the people.
Beautiful.
Very good. And the people in these boxes on your screen, we have sustained this conversation now. Wow. I don't want to even think about it.
Coming up on 3.
We're coming up. That's right. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Send us your comments and have a great Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
See you next
Shalom.
week.
Shabbat Shalom.
Parasha Talk.